Thank you once again for joining us for an episode of the More People podcast. I'm your host today, Andrew Fitzmaurice, CEO at More People. My guest in this episode, Aggie Mutuma. Thanks for joining us, Aggie.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
So I think there's more to talk about today than there will be time to talk about it. But I loved your bio on LinkedIn, the nature of executive leadership coach, award-winning diversity, inclusion, anti-racism strategist and speaker.
Yes.
And we know each other through former roles in the food industry.
That's correct. Yes.
Of which you've had a few. So for people who aren't perhaps familiar with who you are, in a soundbite or two, what's your career story? What's your career history? How did you get to be here today?
I started in the people space. So I've led people teams for organizations that most people recognize. So Tesco Stores Limited, McDonald's restaurants. And most latterly, I was the group people director for Argent Foods, which is how we all came across each other. My roles have always been the full people experience, everything from recruitment right through to the end and all the beautiful pieces in between. So talent succession, development, values, behaviors, everything that an organization needs to do to maximize the potential of its people.
And today, what's taking up most of your time today?
Diversity and inclusion. So I lead a consultancy called Mahogany Inclusion Partners, and we support organizations on their diversity and inclusion journeys. And we've had the pleasure of working with large organizations, again, that you'll probably recognize, global brands and also smaller local brands as well.
So I always think we're really blessed on our podcast to be able to bring a broad range of guests from lots of different industries to talk to us. So it's great to have an authority in the room today on diversity and inclusion. I always feel, as I imagine a lot of people in my position do, as a somewhat imposter, as a white cis male, not the authority necessarily to be talking about it, fearful of getting into sticky water, even though the intentions are good. And from my perspective in recruitment, when we are dealing with clients for their preferred supplier lists and thinking about the candidate pools that they want us to fish in, or what shortlists look like when we come to present candidates, clearly diversity and inclusion plays a part. So I'm guessing a lot of the people watching this podcast will be having it high on the agenda, but not necessarily knowing where to start or how to go about it.
I would say that, firstly, I'll start where you started the conversation, that diversity and inclusion is actually about everybody. And that's one of the starters for Mahogany, why I started Mahogany. As an executive coach, a lot of my coaches happen to be men like you, so white males, because they happen to be in leadership. And I found on many occasions, they found the conversation about diversity and inclusion quite difficult. They felt it wasn't about them. They felt that they weren't the authority. They didn't want to get it wrong. They didn't want to be seen as, sexist or homophobic or racist by saying the wrong thing. So it meant that they stayed away and they didn't necessarily engage. But we know in any organization or society at large, we need everybody engaged. We need, especially our leaders, engaged. So I wanted to find a way to be able to have sometimes tough conversations, but in a kind, human way. If I was in my office, one of the words that I love the most is love. So it's above my head, actually. Love is my word. And that's essentially what drives a lot of what we do around how do we have these conversations in a compassionately challenging way? How do we have strategic conversations, but ensure that everyone can be engaged in it without finger pointing, without blaming anyone, but actually having real conversations around how do we change things and how do we ensure that we are getting the best candidates? And that means a diverse pool of candidates, because they are the best candidates, aren't they, when you have a diverse pool of people.
And I guess we talk a lot on this podcast about biases and everyone being aware, and there's lots and lots of different types of biases that we become more cognizant of, and then you think yourself back into a dark space again when you're worrying about how you're perceived and how your thinking is influenced. When it comes to candidate shortlists, is there an expectation or a best practice in how the percentage makeup of shortlists reflects society, reflects these different groups? How do you approach that, particularly in an industry that is significantly skewed more towards more traditional makeup?
So I'd say, the blue sky, if we're to talk about a North Star of a candidate pool, it would mirror society. It would. That's what it would do. But what we'd need to take into account is also geography. Where are you? So if you're in the Outer Hebrides, your candidate pool probably wouldn't look the same as it would if you're in London, as an example, because the pool is potentially different. And then also you'd need to apply the industry pool to that as well. There are some industries which are more, to use your word, more traditional in terms of the makeup. So some industries are more white male dominated. That's the way they are. So it isn't about being an organization in that industry and thinking we need to have a really diverse pool because you're fishing from a non-diverse pond. What I would suggest definitely is, how are you being as inclusive as you can be in that context, but also our industries are made up of organizations, aren't they? So actually it's about what is your influence in the industry? What are you doing to attract more people into that industry? How are you building that future pipeline and working towards, like, in, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years time, we expect a more diverse pipeline because we're doing something about it. If we don't do anything about it, it's probably not going to change.
So what can organizations proactively do to try and drive some of this evolution of the workforce? If we think of MorePeople as a 35-person business, we're in an old-fashioned town, so that it's not very cosmopolitan.
Yeah.
But our workforce is starting to reflect more diversity than it ever has done before, because there's more critical mass, which is great to see.
Yeah.
So the numbers help, but what can organizations be doing proactively to try and address some of those things?
The first thing is a mindset shift. Often organizations believe that the diversity is not there. So I think the first mindset shift is the diversity is there. It is there. And then the question is, then how do we bring them in? So one of the first pieces around thinking about the workplace itself, how inclusive is it? Working and looking at more people today. Love your offices and love the energy and the vibe. You can see we've got, your chairman speaking to everybody in the organization. They can all just say hi and pop in, and you can see there's a beautiful culture. So that is definitely one of the big linchpins around having that really open culture. And one thing people don't realize is that inclusion and diversity aren't just standalone things on their own. They are actually about the culture of the organization. So this would be a great test bed, I suppose, for inclusion and diversity. Then it is about letting people know that your doors are open for them. It may sound odd, but a lot of people wouldn't see themselves in certain organizations or certain industries. They might think, well, I'm a woman, so that industry is not for me. I'm a person of color, that industry is not for me, because I don't see people who look like me there. So actually being open and inviting and saying, we want to, we recognize we haven't got enough women in this organization, if that was your case. So we actually actively encourage women. So we're showing up at events that speak to women. We're showing up at networking events for women. Same for people of color, same for the LGBTQ plus communities, being out there and inviting them in.
So another question I wanted to segue from that point is this idea of equity and equality. And the more you read, the more you pull the thread, the more confused I think sometimes you get as to which approach is appropriate.
Yes.
What's your view on the differences between equity and equality and how they manifest in the workplace?
Both come from the same thing, which is that the ultimate goal, and I always think about end positions. I'm an engineer at heart, so I was design engineer backwards. So the end point of what we want is that everyone has an equal opportunity to get recruited, to be promoted, to have success in an organization. That's the end goal.
Yep.
And so that's equality, that everyone has that equal opportunity. But to actually get there, because of where we've been historically, because of where our industries are, as you have spoken to, an equity approach needs to be taken. So I'll give you an example. So let's say we built a beautiful building, of which this is, but we're talking about a different building. Beautiful building, it's brand new, it's got the latest of everything, it's really comfortable, and everyone loves being in the building. To get to the building, there's a beautiful set of stairs to get into that building. Now we can say we're treating everybody equally because everyone can come. We're not stopping anyone from coming to this building at all.
Yeah.
But the stairs are the only way to get in. That means that people who maybe have limited mobility, people who maybe wheelchair users, people pushing prams maybe, whatever that may be, are not going to be able to enter the building. So an equity approach in that example would be having ramps, having lifts, having other ways of getting into the building. Then that way you're doing something slightly different for people to allow them to have that equal access. So that's essentially what that looks like in the workplace as well. So when you see programs for women, as an example, when you see organizations going out saying we want to recruit more women or want to recruit more people of color, that's that equity approach.
We're becoming increasingly diverse from a religion point of view, but again, it's a sticky topic, I suppose, to get bogged down in, because you're fearful of asking some of the questions for fear of why you're asking them, even though, to your point, it coming from a place of love, I think is a great approach. And curiosity, recruiters are instinctively very curious, so asking questions to find this stuff out without fear of being vilified for asking it
Yeah.
in the first place.
Yeah.
When it comes to things like diversities of religion and dealing with things like perhaps Ramadan and Eid, for example, the equity piece to treat people fairly or appropriately based on their need, they become factors as well.
Absolutely. And again, piggybacking from what you just said, I think where you have that great intention, lead with that. Like, I'd really love to get to know more about you because I'm so interested in people. Here's my question. Or we really want to support you to ensure that if there's anything that you need, if you need adjustments, whatever that may be, um, this is why I'm asking that question, then ask the question. So I think leading with that explanation,
Yeah.
because while you have great intentions and for your question, we do need to accept that in our society, there are people who are hardcore sexists or hardcore racists or hardcore homophobics, etc., etc. And maybe that person you speak to has come across some of that and has come across some of those people asking for negative reasons. So you can understand why they might be a bit reticent to engage. So if you lead with your intention of why you're asking and then ask the question, I think more likely than not, people will understand what your intention is.
I know when we teach recruiters how to ask the right interview questions or how to ask the pointy question or the contentious question when it comes to the recruitment process, we can find the words quite easily. I think when it comes to these challenges that we're talking about here, finding the right words to sum up the intention and the point of love is sometimes harder. Or maybe it's not harder. Maybe we just make it difficult unnecessarily for ourselves because there's such a big amount of fear.
That's what I think. And I think that fear piece, I think that's something that I definitely want to keep challenging. And the way we, not you and I clearly, but we broadly sometimes have the conversation, it's very finger pointing, it's very blamey, it's very, as the kids say these days, cancelling. Probably my children are going to cringe. But yeah, I'm sure that's the language. I'm not sure. But that cancel culture. And I don't think that's right because these are human conversations that we need to have. And then also, I think we do sometimes complicate it more than we need to, because if you think about it, you're speaking to someone you love, if you're talking to a child or your child, you are going to say, honey, I need you to do this because, you're going to do that, aren't you? Or you're going to be really tired tomorrow, so you need to go to bed. So we do it naturally. It's a human thing we do. But I think when we put the workplace as a lens on something happens in our brains, which I don't think it needs to because we're still humans. And then when we're thinking, oh my gosh, it's a woman and I'm thinking about diversity, or it's a black person, I'm thinking about diversity, and I don't want to upset them. We just sort of then get into this, get in our heads. But I think if we just apply, and even if you think about your loved ones, if you're explaining something around, this needs to happen, but here's why, it's going to stand you in good stead then anyway.
I also think there's a heck of a lot to be learned from the children as well. I've noticed that my children have had such a different approach to the societal norms
Yes.
until they almost learn the bad habits. They start from such an innocent place.
Yeah.
I remember having conversations with my kids about trying to describe a footballer,
Yeah.
and they'll tell you which position they play,
Yeah.
they'll tell you what shirt they wear, they'll tell you their hairstyle, long before they mention any other attributes, which is almost the reverse to what is typical in society.
Yes. And that's why I always lean on the fact, and it might be rose-tinted glasses, but that's okay, it works for me, is that we're talking about humans. These are all human connections, human emotions, human feelings. And if we just focus on that, then like you said, we can be like our babies and just, I don't like you because I just don't like you
Yeah.
because of how you act, not because of how you look, not because of who you love, not because of, how you practice your faith. I just don't like you because we just don't get on. And I like you because we get on, and that's it.
Well, look, I think we're all on a journey with this, and it's a journey we probably never reach the end of. We keep improving and keep getting better and better. And I think I could talk to you all day about it. It would certainly help my understanding of it and the team's understanding of it as well. So, no, thank you. This has been brilliant.
Oh, thank you. I've loved it. And it is a journey, and I'll say that you never stop learning. I'm still learning. I do this, I live this, I breathe this every single day. But you're always learning because, again, it goes back to human beings. We're beautiful in so many ways. We're also complex and simple at the same time, aren't we? So, yeah, I've loved it. Thank you.